Hello, everybody, and welcome to the ALS United Mid-Atlantic Goals Podcast. My name is Tony Haya with ALS United Mid-Atlantic, and we have been posting podcasts since early in 2025 with different people talking about their various perspectives on ALS, from those living with the disease, caregivers, medical staff here at ALS United Mid-Atlantic, like nurses and social workers, other people who have been involved in advocacy, or even with other diseases like Huntington's disease and Parkinson's. And I love talking with people who are sharing their support and their personal story. Today, I am super excited and honored to talk to two of my friends who have been involved with us locally and nationally in the ALS cause. They are famous for using their voice for good and also using their voices for baseball as well. They are the co-hosts of the podcast, Is This a Great Game or What?, which I really encourage you to listen to. First, we have Jeff Kurkjian, who is a host here on radio in Philadelphia and WXTU, and his dad, Hall of Fame baseball writer Tim Kurkjian. We're going to talk about their ALS stories, a little bit of baseball, and hopefully encourage you to be involved in the ALS cause as well. So, Tim and Jeff, thank you so much for speaking today.
Tony, thank you for having us. It's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, it's nice to do a podcast, Dad, where we're not having to come up with all the questions. We can just sit back and relax and be interviewed for once, which is nice.
It's easier, Tony, to be interviewed than it is to interview somebody. Although I must say, Jeff Kurkjian he's always been really good at it. But when we do our podcast, he hasn't even met like 90% of the people that we interview, and yet he's such a great listener. This is a lesson for everyone. He's such a good listener. He can follow the conversation and know what question comes next. It's an art, and he's got it.
That's why I love your podcast, because you are a baseball expert, and your son will ask a question that is a good question, but he's not coming from it with 40 years of baseball experience. He's coming at it more closer to someone like me who likes baseball. And so you give an answer that I think is very easy to digest for anybody.
Well, that's kind of the idea. And Jeff was never a baseball expert, which was perfectly fine at our house. When I was watching every single game imaginable and playing everything imaginable when I was a kid, Jeff was a good little athlete, but he was watching, whose line is it anyway, as opposed to a baseball game every night. So we kind of knew Jeff was going to do something in the entertainment business, but maybe not in the baseball business. And I think it makes our podcast better that he knows a lot about a lot of things. And poor Pop-Up here knows, baseball, basketball, and sitcoms from the 60s, and that's about it.
Like, I won't have any basketball questions, I promise, because I know very little about basketball. I know we end up having to talk about Jordan versus LeBron, and that's as far as my basketball knowledge goes. But you're here because of your ALS connection with your brother, Matt, Tim. Tim, then Jeff, tell me about when ALS first came into your life.
Yeah, it was really sad, but it was really weird. Jeffrey was working with my dad. Jeff, why don't you tell Tony that night you guys were fixing the piano and what that was like? Because I think that was the start of it, right?
Yeah, so this was during COVID, and my Uncle Matt and I, my love of DIYing and creating things around my house came from my Uncle Matt. He had this amazing unfinished basement filled with every tool imaginable, and he was so meticulous with keeping them clean and organized, and I always respected and appreciated that and loved going to his house to do projects. And I was home, and my mom, who at the time was big into taking old furniture and revitalizing it, but she had a big project that she wanted to do, taking an old upright piano, removing the large metal harp that weighs like 1,500 pounds. It's ridiculous. And removing that and then having the shell of the upright piano to create into a bar top or a desk or something, kind of make it vintagey. So my Uncle Matt and I got to work, and we had to take out every single pin, that's what they're called, in the harp that holds the strings together and makes the noise. You get it. So these pins were not easy, though. We're using a tool, and you have to get leverage. You got to push it through. Well, my Uncle Matt was a college Hall of Fame college baseball player, and even into his 60s was the strongest guy in the world, right? I was in my 20s and he could out arm wrestle anybody. And so he was really having trouble getting these pins out. And I'm not saying it was easy, and this is not a credit to my strength, but I was ultimately the one that, okay, well, let me give it a shot. And I did it, and he couldn't. And that evening, when we got finished, we went into the basement. My dad was there, and my dad asked me, hey, did you notice that Uncle Matt kind of has a raspy voice a little bit? He's going through a sickness or something. And it was wintertime. It was cold and flu season time. I kind of didn't really put the strength thing together, but in hindsight, Dad, yeah, that's really around the time when we started to realize that the motor functions of his strength was fading, and his voice was fading too.
Right. And then the real eye-opener, Tony, that really got us worried is my brother Matt was a great athlete. And he was, soon after the piano situation, he went and got a sandwich at a local place and was running back to his car, as he so often did. And he made a little jump over a curb or something, and he fell down. My brother was as good an athlete as anyone his size that I think I've ever met. And he fell down. And he told me about it later, and I just thought, well, it was awkward. Well, as it turns out, that was probably the first sign that something was going wrong. And this was in January. And then I would say by May, he called me and he said, I'm having trouble throwing a baseball. My hand is not working properly. My brother had a major league throwing arm, and now he's having trouble gripping and throwing a baseball. So I went and played catch with him in his front yard, two guys in their 60s. We did this every day of our lives when we were kids. And he looked almost unathletic throwing a baseball. And it really struck me hard, like, oh my God, there's something. When my brother can't throw a baseball anymore, something has to be wrong. And that led to every single doctor he went to. We were hoping it was Parkinson's or something else. But when nothing else came up, later that summer, he called me and sent out a text to everyone in our family that he has ALS. And that was the worst day of my whole life right there.
I understand that news so well from my personal family, and also here when I hear someone say, hey, I know this person, because I understand it very well from my experience. And you, Tim, having been in baseball and baseball being so connected to ALS, did you have a knowledge in your head of what that meant that maybe someone else might not? Because most people don't know about ALS until it impacts them.
Right. Well, I only knew about ALS because of Lou Gehrig, the greatest first baseman of all time. My brother and I watched that movie, Pride of the Yankees, 1,000 times when we were kids. And I had also gotten to know Curt Schilling a little bit. He was my teammate at ESPN, and he named his son Gehrig, and he was very involved in ALS. So that was the extent of my understanding, was through Lou Gehrig and Curt Schilling. And now, of course, it has now affected our family. So when my brother was going through this, I just kept praying that be something else, please, something that we can explain, something that, at least at the time, curable. And it never happened. And like I said, that made it really, really difficult.
So, Jeff, what was that like for you? Because you probably knew something as well from your own life, and but your perspective was probably different.
Yeah, I think everybody who listens to this podcast can relate to the story of finding out that your loved one has ALS and then doing that first Google search.
Mm-hmm.
And it's devastating. I mean, it's devastating. I was living in Las Vegas at the time, and I was with my now wife, and so I kind of felt like, not to make this about me, but I was on a little bit of an island. And I didn't really know, because my whole family, my sister, my dad, Uncle Matt's two kids, were all in Maryland, all in our hometown, 15 minutes from each other. And so I didn't really know how to perceive the news, because I didn't really have the support system to understand how serious it was. And I did some Googling, and I actually, a couple days later, I called the the chapter of the ALS Association then in Southern Nevada. And I asked to I needed to find out more about this. I didn't really know who to talk to. My family, we were all very emotional, so the thought of talking to any of them was almost difficult because I didn't want my dad to have to relive and sit there and tell me how serious this was when his best friend is diagnosed with an incurable disease. And I just proceeded to talk to this incredible woman for 20 minutes, crying on and off. We're both chatting, getting to know each other. I'm asking questions. She's getting to know my uncle. And I'm so grateful for groups like ALS United Mid-Atlantic because you guys receive those types of calls from the nephew of an ALS patient who's just kind of curious, what in the world is this? And I remember getting a call from my sister and her saying, Jeff, this is really bad. And I know, and I remember that call like it was yesterday. And, yeah, Tony, but I think the most beautiful thing is the community that ALS has brought together so unfortunately. And whether it's ALS United Mid-Atlantic or my Uncle Matt's alma mater, Catholic U, who did so much for the cause, named an award after him. And Dad, I know there's a number of stories after his diagnosis that you should tell and get into about Catholic University's amazing work with Uncle Matt. It's the community that nobody wants to be a part of. But I'm not glad to be a part of it because that's not the right way to put it, but the best case scenario is finding groups like ALS United Mid-Atlantic to help you through the darkest times of your life. I don't wish for anybody to have to find ALS United Mid-Atlantic, and I mean that respectfully, Tony, because I know you made it your life. You understand it, yeah.
Tony, just to show you how cruel the timing is, Jeffrey and I did the celebrity softball game from Coors Field in Colorado. And Jeff was the play-by-play guy for the celebrity softball game on ESPN, and I was the color guy. It was like the coolest thing ever. I got to work with my son. And 2 days after, maybe the highlight of my professional career, getting to work with my son, we got news that Uncle Matt was diagnosed officially with ALS. And that was also on the same day that I was nominated for one of three nominated to go into the Hall of Fame as a baseball writer. The same day of the greatest day of my whole life professionally was also the day we found out about my brother. And that was just the cruelest thing, that I had such a great time with Jeff. Then I get this great news that I've been nominated for this award that every baseball writer wants to win someday. And then we found out later that day that Uncle Matt was diagnosed with ALS officially. So it just affected me so terribly. But Jeff's right. What we've learned from this is the worst disease ever, but it also has the strongest support system ever. And the support we got from Catholic University was just unbelievable. So I told you that Uncle Matt couldn't even throw a baseball because his hand didn't work properly anymore. And yet, Ross Natoli, the baseball coach at Catholic U, asked Matt to throw out the ceremonial first pitch at the only fall date that they had to play baseball, a doubleheader at Mount St. Mary's. So I said, Matt, they want you to throw out the first ball. So he practiced and practiced and practiced, throwing when his hand doesn't even work anymore. And we went up there, and when we got to Mount St. Mary's, Ross Natoli gave us all Matt Kurkjian jerseys with his name on the back and number 2, the number he wore at Catholic U. It was a Catholic University jersey. So his entire immediate family, there were like 10 of us there, all wore Matt Kurkjian jerseys to watch him throw out the first pitch. And of course, he threw an athletic strike, because there is no way my brother Matt was going out on a baseball field and not looking like a ball player. After he threw out the first pitch, he looked to his right. Tony, all 48 players on the Catholic University team were wearing Matt Kurkjian number 2 jerseys. Matt didn't even see them until he turned to his right. And that's the first time I'd seen him cry since that ordeal began. And he looked at me and he goes, I can't believe they're doing this for me. Well, we can all believe they were doing it for Matt. And eventually, as Jeff said, they named an award after my brother at Catholic University, the annual Matt Kurkjian Ultimate Teammate Award. 3 different Catholic U seniors have received that award since they named it in after Matt. And I can say without hesitation, having covered baseball all these years, there is no greater compliment than he's a great teammate. And there was no better teammate, not just in baseball, but in everything, than my brother Matt.
That's such a great story. And as you're saying it, though, I'm thinking that as sad as ALS is and that news is, I imagine he was so proud to get your news. So, if it had been a couple years earlier, then he wouldn't have gotten that news. If it had been a couple years earlier, because of the situation in 2020, because I don't like saying it, he wouldn't have been able to do those things. So the disease is awful, but I always find these bright sides with the timing and like appreciating life that you might not get with other diseases even, and you will always have those memories that will live forever even beyond you.
Yeah, and
Yes, and sorry, Jeff. And so when we went to Cooperstown, Uncle Matt was still in pretty darn good health. He knew exactly what was going on. He spoke at the little function that we had after I was inducted. And Jeff, you remember that. You remember how great that was that Uncle Matt understood everything that was going on.
yeah, he got to speak and on behalf of, honoring his little brother Timmy over there, and and talk about timing. He got diagnosed in 2021. My wife and we got married in 2022, and then shortly thereafter moved out to Pennsylvania, and with my family in Maryland. Moving there kind of very all of the sudden happened right after we got married. It happened very quickly, but it allowed me to spend the final year and a half of his life in Pennsylvania so I could be just 3 hours driving as opposed to a 6 hour flight away, and was able to be a part of some family functions and some big things and big highlights in the life. And Dad, even New Year's into 2023, so he passed away Labor Day of 2023, so now we're talking January the 1st of that same year. We were all in Florida celebrating his oldest brother's 70th birthday, in which he could be there. He traveled down, 8 months before he passed away. And Dad, yes, was he in great shape? No, but he was still walking. We'd put him in a wheelchair from time to time to get where we needed to go, and he would sit mostly, but he was still communicating as best as he could. He was there. I mean, he was enjoying himself, and he got to be down there with our entire family, which was such a blessing. And
Yep. Tony, he was so strong. Let me tell you, after I was inducted in the Hall of Fame, I was asked to throw out the first ball at a Nationals game. So the Nationals asked me, who do you want to catch the ceremonial first pitch? And I said, well, my brother Matt's going to catch the ceremonial first pitch. He's coming with me. He couldn't even get a glove on his hand because his hand no longer worked. He was a great defensive infielder, specifically a third baseman. He could catch anything hit his way. And now he can't even put a glove on properly because his hand no longer works. So I walked to the front of the mound. I threw a pitch with a firmly thrown pitch to home plate, and my brother caught it right here, just like a ball player would catch it. And I told all of his ALS doctors what he had done this deep into his ALS and how his hand didn't even work, but he found a way to put a glove on. And because he was so athletic, he caught a pitch thrown from 40 feet away. And I said, only my brother could have caught that ball. And I knew he would catch it. I didn't worry I was going to hurt him because I knew he was going to catch it. And that was one of the highlights of my entire life, was I got to throw out the first ball. That's not the point. The point is my older brother caught it.
That's so special. It's like I said, it's going to live forever. We all have memories with our families that it's meaningful for you personally, and no one else will ever understand what it means to you. But let me get to Pennsylvania, because as soon as Jeff got here, he reached out to us, and which does not happen often, where someone reaches out to us and say, "I want to be very involved." So he started coming to some events. But Tim, you have such an extensive knowledge of baseball. Did you have an appreciation of how deeply committed the Phillies were to ALS before this? Because they've been doing support for ALS since 1984.
Well, I didn't know until my brother got sick. And then now I have learned that no team in the major leagues, and I hope I'm not offending any other team, does a better job than the Phillies. As soon as it was clear that we as a family were affected, the Phillies jumped right in the middle of it. John Brazier and all of the people at the Phillies. I can't even begin to tell you how appreciative and impressed I've been. Jeffrey and I did a podcast there in June of 2024, and the Phillies set us up for whatever we needed, provided guests, provided areas for us to do our show. And that night, I went out on the field at Citizens Bank Park to, be a part of the pregame Lou Gehrig festivities. And it was such a thrill for me to be able to represent my brother. And then last year, and this has never happened to me before, the Phillies had me go into the Phillies clubhouse and address the Phillies team. So I'm speaking to Bryce Harper. I'm speaking to, Kyle Schwarber and Alec Boehm and all of them. And I'm a little uncomfortable because I've talked to these guys a million times, of course, but never about this. So I just had to explain to them what our family went through. I explained to them who my brother is. And I explained to them what baseball does for people in need. And baseball, especially Catholic University, has done so much for my family, but the Phillies have done a remarkable job in assisting our family with whatever we needed for ALS.
Yeah, Jeff, I've seen you at the Lou Gehrig Day, ALS Awareness Day with the Phillies. I've been texting with you like, hey, I see you down in that section. What's it like for you to see that it's not just that the Phillies, contribute some money or put some name on for awareness, but that it's such a full involvement in the ALS cause?
Well, it means so much. And moving to this community and embracing this team as me and my family's team. I mean, my daughter is now a massive Phillies fan. She's born in Pennsylvania. She will remain a Phillies fan. My wife, who didn't grow up with a baseball team, we've adopted the Phillies as our own. And it's been so neat to, as I said, moving here in 2022 amid his diagnosis and then finding a team that is so passionate about supporting a cause that is so close to our family is really special. And I love being at a Phillies game. I love the recognition they give to Lou Gehrig Day and ALS awareness. And I always think there's more that every organization can do, not just the Phillies, but all organizations across Major League Baseball. I think there's too many people that are affected by this that we need to get as much information out there as we possibly can, and this doing a podcast like this is a great start, of course, and going to the game on Lou Gehrig Day is an awesome way of doing that as well, but there can always be more.
Yeah, and Tony, when we did the Lou Gehrig Day podcast from Citizens Bank, of course, Aaron Nola, we asked for him first, and he came up and talked for almost a half an hour with us about his uncle who died of ALS. We talked to other people in the game, Brandon Crawford's dad, of course, Mike Crawford, and several others. We talked to John Shambi and Sarah Langs, who all have connections to this. And that's what I really learned was just once you have this, you are connected forever. And I just saw, for instance, Tommy Nance, relief pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays. And I knew that he lost his dad to ALS. And I think I maybe talked to Tommy Nance twice in my life. And I just went up to him during the playoffs and told him, that we're connected this way. And we had the most marvelous chat because sadly, we have something to talk about when it comes to ALS, and we could commiserate. And that's what I've learned is once you have a connection, everyone will help you along the way.
It's neat to see how so many of the players with the Phillies, whether it's Aaron Nola or some others of the team now, or even legends from the team from years ago, really take it seriously. And I have some fun moments with people like Ryan Howard, who, on the one hand, I remember a story you guys may have met Ellen Phillips with her organization. She is not a tall woman. And she tells a story about she was once at a store and Ryan Howard noticed her. And imagine if Ryan Howard is the one that notices you, and he helped her reach stuff at the grocery store. And then another Phillies event where Ryan Howard was doing autographs, and I just remember this because I was with the patient, and there's a line of people doing autographs, and he gets up and says, "Wait, that's my buddy over there. That's Kevin." And he gets up and gets Kevin to come up to get his autograph, and it was just so sincere. It wasn't like when you see something with celebrities who may be great and they just sign off and they don't look like all of the players, whether they were new or legends, people like Mickey Morandini, who are still involved today, they take it to heart. And that means so much to our patients when they go to an event that they know it's not just another day for them.
Right. And I met Michael Brown through the Phillies also. The first time I met Michael Brown, I looked at him and he has ALS. He was so big and so strong and so athletic. And I'm thinking, how in the world can this guy have ALS? He looks like the picture of health. He's so athletic, he's so big and so strong. And I've stayed in touch with him because his story moved me so much because he reminded me of my Uncle Matt, only he was bigger than my Uncle Matt, but just as athletic and just as strong.
And Michael just did a basketball event for ALS research this past weekend. So he's still very involved. And it was really neat. A friend of mine, his girlfriend's daughter was doing photography for that event. And just like, do you know about this? I'm like, oh, yeah, Michael Brown is amazing. So you never know the connections. But I want to mention the other connections because you said John Shambi, Sarah Langs. Jeff, you helped us get connected to them because I asked people to be involved in our annual celebration. So, what was that like? Seeing this wider community of baseball people like John, like Sarah, who are connected to this cause and just feel like one big family.
Well, I'm worried because I had my dad speak at the celebration luncheon. Then I helped get Sarah Langs and Boog Shambi. I'm really running out of ideas here, Tony, for next year. I'm running out of people to ask. So I'm going to have to tap into my dad's address book over there and see if I can get somebody else. But jokes aside, listen, it's when I called Boog to be a part of the ALS celebration luncheon this past just a month ago. In this community, I think everybody has that, yeah, I'll do anything if I can. If I'm available, if I'm free, I'll be there and I'll do it. Example two, my dad, right? Like my dad is that way. He ended up spending a couple more days with us because we needed his help back at home. But at one point, Dad, our plan was for you to just drive up to Philly from Maryland, do the event, come say hi, hug your friend Boog, and support the cause, and then drive back down 3 hours. And there was no hesitation from you. There was no hesitation from Boog. There was no hesitation from Sarah Langs. There's no hesitation from me. And Tony, let me explain that's not a me specific thing. Arriving into this town and calling you guys and saying anything you need. I'll hand out flyers or I'll host events, little or small, or big or small. I'm here to help the cause. But that's just because I've been so inspired by so many others who feel that way about this community that I feel like it's the least I can do for what they've done for me and my family specifically, and our Uncle Matt, of course.
Well, we look forward to having both of you at future events. You've spoken, Jeff, at our Help and Hope Symposium a couple times. And
let's
that's
talk
great.
about that, Tony. Okay,
Yeah, let's
the
talk about
Help
it.
and Hope Symposium, Dad, is this incredible program that they do. Okay, it's held at this hall with different rooms, right? And they bring in like ALS's top doctors. And Tony has been so nice to invite me to host it now a couple years in a row. And I basically introduced the doctors, and then the smartest people, the greatest minds in ALS are out here And they are so smart that I'm sitting here trying to keep up with all of the great knowledge they're spewing. I'm the last person who should be hosting this event, but I mean that respectfully because you guys are bringing in such great minds. And I love the example that they set because, Dad, they're in a room full of ALS patients and their families, right? So there was such an air of comfortability, right? There was no, I don't know how to treat this person, because we've all been there, right? We've all been there with patients and their families, with whatever it might be. There was such a comfortability. Everybody could be themselves, and these doctors and these researchers were just comfortable talking about this disease in any sort of way and discussing symptoms, and whatever might be uncomfortable for most people was not uncomfortable in this room. It's one of the coolest events because it allows these patients to ask questions to the leading scientists and doctors when it comes to the research and the treatments being created and tested on, and the trials and what be. I think it's an incredible event, and I'm honored to be a part of it, even though I have no right being in the room with these genius minds when I barely passed mathematics in the 10th grade.
Well, I went to Pittsburgh last summer to what they call the CEO splash. And what happened was a bunch of major CEOs in Pittsburgh. We all met for, hors d'oeuvres and drinks, and not drinks, but and then when the event was over and we all gave a little quick speech, including me, we all went out into the town square in Pittsburgh. And fully clothed, of course, they turned the fountain on. And I said to Paul Jeter, who was in charge of this, Paul was the one that got me involved. I said, Paul, are we going to get wet? He says, wet? You are going to get so soaking wet, you have no idea. So they turned on the jets. We got soaking wet. I had to go take a shower and change clothes because I had to get on an airplane and go back to Maryland after the CEO soak. It was a CEO soak in Pittsburgh. It was just hilarious. It was so great. And by the way, I forgot to tell you this, but sadly, I did the Pete Frates challenge years and years ago, long before my brother got sick. So that was really my introduction to ALS, was through Pete Frates and his incredible mother, his incredible father. But I was covering baseball for ESPN at the time, and I got challenged by Rick Sutcliffe to do the ice bucket challenge. So I didn't have anyone around. You have to do it 24 hours after you get challenged. So I didn't have anyone around me. So I went out in my front yard and dumped a bucket of ice water all over my head to show that I did this. Then I challenged Aaron Boone, who at the time was my teammate at ESPN. We were doing games together on Monday Night Baseball. So I challenged him. This was on a Sunday. Monday, we're doing the game that night. Aaron Boone, who of course hit one of the most famous home runs of all time for the Yankees against the Red Sox in 2003, he goes to the barkeep at our hotel and says, I need you to throw a bucket of ice water over my head as part of the ice bucket challenge. Would you be willing to do that? And the barkeep was a pretty young guy, and he looks at Aaron Boone and he goes, I would be happy to do that. You're Aaron Boone. I hate your guts. That's what he said. So Aaron Boone told that whole story on the air that night. So, of course, the Ice Bucket Challenge is nothing to laugh about, but we got a good chuckle about that. And that's when I learned, all right, people are really working at this. And the Ice Bucket Challenge and the Frates family was just unbelievable.
Yeah, they're a real inspiration still. And so many people who did that in 2014 or 2015 are still involved in one way or another. So it made a big splash, pun intended, but we obviously have a long way to go. Jeff, the Help and Hope event for 2026 is going to involve topics such as AI and research. So how the AI can be used in research. It's going to be talking about brain-computer interface with a company that's been doing some work even in Australia. And as you heard at our annual celebration, Pennsylvania just passed money for brain research, which will help ALS, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. So we're hoping to talk about collaboration beyond ALS and how we can all work together on issues like caregiving. So broadening our audience. It's on April 9th, 2026, again in King of Prussia, so same place. So if you're listening and you're interested, visit our website, alsmidatlantic.org. We're still getting the details out there because we're early on, but hope to see people there. It's going to be a great event.
And Tony, I think it's so important, and I don't want to get sciencey, but it was addressed at the last Help and Hope, was the use of AI. And I know, and I'm not trying to make fun of you, Dad, even though I do it a lot on our podcast. I know AI and technology can be sounding like a scary thing, right? We don't really know what it is. Trust me, I'm 32 and I don't know how it works either, Dad. So don't feel stressed out about it. But what AI can do for our ALS patients when it comes to giving them their voice back is unbelievable. It is incredible that we can take a sample from a home video of an ALS patient who now has lost their voice, and it's 60 seconds of them talking, and plug it in and make it sound like on their computer, their communication device, that it is truly their voice talking. Even in just the last couple years. Tony, I remember my Uncle Matt, when he first got his device, it was an exhaustive process to get him to be able to record all of the things. I mean, hours of text he would need to read in order to create a sample of his voice, right? And when you have ALS, that's the last of your concern is in that moment, right? But now with the technology, it's absolutely incredible how easy, I don't want to say easy, but how much easier it is for our patients to be able to get their voice back. And, when it comes to people like Uncle Matt, it's so devastating because his voice was everything. He was the guy who would walk into a party and would be shouting everybody, Timmy! He would be screaming everybody's name and giving hugs, and he's the one who would command the room with his voice telling his story at dinner. He was that guy. And so for our family, losing his voice, as my Aunt Terry said, his sister-in-law, my dad's oldest brother's wife, said, that was the most devastating. And that went early. That went early, and he lost confidence, Dad. You can, it was heartbreaking because he didn't feel like he could be himself, and then his personality, and he handled it very well. I do not mean to speak poorly of him, but it did affect his confidence.
Of course it did. And when we were at the event in Philadelphia just a couple months ago, a couple of patients came up, and using AI, we actually heard their real voice and tell their real story. And Jeff, I remember how powerful this was. One of the fellows came up and he said, this is what it's like to have ALS. He goes, I am really hungry and I want a cheese pizza, but I can't tell anybody, or my face, I can't explain through my body because it no longer works how excited I am about eating a cheese pizza. He said, things are really funny to me on the inside, but my body will not allow me to laugh and show everyone how much I enjoy that. And he said, there are times I'm really sad and disappointed and depressed, but my body will not allow me to signal that. And that's when I really learned just how bad it is to be an ALS patient, that these things are going on inside of you and your body will not allow to transmit your emotion about that.
And I don't want to be crass when I say this, Tony, but one of the things that being in this community has taught me, and it's hard, it's really hard, and I'm sure families deal with this, patients definitely deal with this, is it's so hard to not treat the person in your life that has ALS differently because they can't communicate with you. But I'm just going to say it. They're not dumb. Right? Mm-hmm. But it's, you know what I mean? They're not idiots. They're people. They're your person. That's your person. But it can be so hard because of what their body is doing. You feel as if, and this is something I struggled with mightily with Uncle Matt, was you feel as if you have to treat them differently. And of course, you do in a lot of ways. You got to take care of them and you got to be there for them. But it's still the same person. But it can be difficult. Sitting down and talking to an ALS patient and waiting for their response and not getting a laughter in return. No doubt about it. But I think if one thing, it's taught us that that's still your person in there. That's still their heart. That's still their mind going as strong as ever. And it can be challenging. And so to all the families out there that listen to this podcast, that is a challenge. And I understand firsthand how difficult that is. And our patients who are listening too, we see you. We know that that is you. We see that. And I strive every day when I meet a patient with ALS to treat them exactly the way I would treat them if they were up and walking around like everybody else. And it can be challenging, but it's the right thing to do. And this is the only platform I feel comfortable talking this candidly about that, right? Because this is our community. These are our people, so to speak.
Well, it really being here, I think, improves how I would treat other people. And I feel like the people I work with, whether it's our staff or board or volunteers, it makes us better people being involved with it. Tim, the person you mentioned that gave that speech, his name's Brian Rosica. We'll link to his YouTube video because we have it on YouTube. We'll link to that here because it was such a great moment at that event. I heard him speak in Philadelphia back in May. And right after that, I said, he has to speak. We have to find a way for him to speak because he was so powerful and funny. So, that was a reason to have him there because you don't always have humor at our events to that same extent. And he was really funny. And so it's really great to see people time and again. Boog was saying how that was a great part of the day. He even changed his speech to talk about Brian's speech. So that meant a lot to Brian and his wife, Lisa, that people were paying attention and cared.
Absolutely. It was a tremendous event. And every time I go to one of these, I learn something, a lot of things that I don't know. And that's kind of the idea here. Let's learn and let's make it better.
So I have two people who talk baseball all the time. I reached out to some of our staff and said, I get to talk to Tim and Jeff on our podcast. What kind of baseball question can I ask if they don't ask each other constantly? Like I can't ask you about the best player to any number because you've gone through all of them. But the one question I got from Chris was, we have the Field of Dreams game, which is an awesome game in Iowa. So if you could have a Major League Baseball game played in anywhere in the country that you don't typically have a game, where would you like to see a baseball game held as a special event? Maybe a special ALS event even.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to do this, but we should have a regular season Major League game played in Cooperstown, New York, the birthplace of the Hall of Fame Museum. The field that they have there is probably not going to get it done. They would have to build an entire new field in a completely different place. But seriously, if you've been to Cooperstown, which is just the most ludicrously charming place I've ever been in my life, and it houses the greatest baseball players of all time, there is no doubt if we could make this work, we should play a Major League game in Cooperstown, New York.
Well, if you build it, they will come. I think that's the lesson we have.
Absolutely, they will come. And they will build it. Someone will build that to make sure we have a game every year in Cooperstown. That's my wish.
Jeff, is that your answer too?
I mean, that's a great answer, Dad. I might be speaking out of term here, but I would really love to see a game at Death Valley where Clemson plays football, or at LSU at Tiger Stadium, something like that. I feel like there is a missing link in that area for baseball. I mean, you've got such passionate sports fans, football mostly, obviously, in that area, and not really a lot of baseball besides really the Braves, and then when you get into Florida. So I think bringing baseball to a college football stadium atmosphere, which I could argue, even though I didn't go to a football school, that college football on a Saturday might be the most electric. I mean, think about how many people are in those, or at the Rose Bowl. Have they ever played a game at the Rose Bowl, Dad?
Yes, they have, but it was a long time ago, I'm pretty sure. But you're right. The big house in Michigan or Ohio State at the Horseshoe, yeah, play a big league game there, and then we'll see how many people show up. It would be an event for sure.
And I love football. We have a number of football players who've been impacted by ALS. Steve Gleason as the most notable example, and then others as well. But I feel like with the changes being made in baseball recently, maybe the competition and the World Series was the most exciting finals that I've seen in sports in a while in 2025. Do you think that baseball is becoming more exciting versus some other sports and maybe it's going to get more fans interested in the game.
Yeah, I think baseball is in a really good spot right now. The World Series was the best one I've ever seen, and I've covered 44 of them. Game 7 was the best Game 7 I've ever seen, and I've covered 26 of them. So it's absolutely, the players are bigger, stronger, faster, and better than ever. The talent is breathtaking to watch. And let's hope, with attendance finally going up a little bit, ratings going up a little bit, that baseball continues to grow. Because it's the best game ever. I'm hopelessly biased on this, but it's the best game ever, and there is nothing in sports better than baseball in October.
Well, I agree. And if people want to learn more about your podcast, Jeff, maybe you're the best answer here. Where can people learn about your podcast and how they can follow it and maybe comment and get involved in sharing that cool information?
You know, Tony, I do worry when my dad does podcast interviews or radio show interviews and they end a podcast with that question. So I would be curious, Dad, how would you answer that? Just so I can kind of see how you approach this and I can help you through it if possible.
Well, I always answered the same way. Call my son Jeff. He'll tell you exactly everything. Jeffrey is not just the co-host, Tony. He is the producer, the director, the business manager, the social media correspondent. Jeffrey does it all. All I do is bring some content to the show. Jeffrey takes care of everything else. I say, just go look for Is This a Great Game or What on where you can find your podcast, because it's everywhere. That's good enough. Jeffrey has all the other details that we need to hear from him.
Yeah, that is spot on. Search Is This a Great Game or What wherever you get your podcast. You can go to greatgameorwhat.com. You can follow us on YouTube to watch every episode. Shout out Riverside, which Tony, fun inside baseball. Tony and I were talking when he was thinking about launching this podcast, and I told him about the software we use, and he uses it for this great podcast that you host. I mean, seriously, Tony, you're doing a great job with this show. I know it was a dream for you a year ago at this time, maybe even a little bit before that, but you are absolutely knocking it out of the park, and it's going great. So yeah, go find us, but continue supporting this great show as well.
I appreciate that, and we can only knock it out of the park with great guests like you, Jeff and Tim. Thank you so much for what you do for ALS awareness. And if you want to get involved in our ALS cause, join our YouTube by going to @ALS Mid-Atlantic. Visit our website, alsmidatlantic.org, and follow us on all the social channels. There are like 700 social channels as it is right now, so there's a new one popping up every week, but we try to keep up with it, and we'll share some more information about our research, our events like our ALS United Walk, and of course our involvement with the Philadelphia Phillies, some photos, videos, and more events to come in 2026 and beyond. Jeff and Tim, I hope you have a great holiday season, a great new year, and I'm so grateful that we could be friends and join together for this very important mission.
Same to you, Tony. Thank you so much for having Jeff and I on. It was a pleasure. It was an honor.
Thank you. Is this a great podcast or what? Have a great day. We will be in touch soon.